This is the lecture for Monday, the 6th of December, 2021, for Ancient Medieval History. Go tell the Spartans, strangers passing by, that here, obedient to their laws, we lie. Thus wrote Simonides, and that famous quote is inscribed in stone at Thermopylae today. Go tell the Spartans, strangers passing by, that here, obedient to their laws, we lie. Their laws being a refusal to retreat or surrender. Leonidas and the 300 Spartans remained in that position to delay the Persians for a few more hours, to give Athens a little bit more time to empty itself out of the city and across the strait of water to the island of Salamis. That was Leonidas' purpose, and he did achieve it. He kept the Persians delayed for days. So, what happened, to clarify? First of all, men have body hair. Secondly, Greeks wear body armor. Third, Greeks wear togas and tunics, not leather man panties. None of these things from the movie are true. However, the spirit of never say die that the Spartans exhibited in the film, that's accurate. It isn't bombast, it isn't over the top. Well, it is, but it's also true. The Spartans were over the top. The Spartans were a warrior people. What's rich is them talking about freedom. Why? Why is it rather ironic for the Spartans to be talking about freedom?
Because their entire civilization is based upon slavery.
Yeah. The entire Spartan economy is supported by the helots, or slaves. There are from 7 to 20 slaves for every Spartan man, woman, and child. The entire ethos of Sparta is about controlling the slaves. So, yeah, it's kind of ironic. But what the Spartans meant was freedom for free men. Much as a South Carolina tobacco grower who had 150 slaves on a plantation could talk about freedom when fighting the Revolutionary War against the British. He meant freedom for free men, not for property. However, many in Greece, particularly in Athens, talked about freedom for every citizen, and the idea was a much more broad picture than Sparta, just as many Americans, including some from South Carolina, were fighting for the principles of freedom for everyone. Even Thomas Jefferson wanted an end of slavery in 1776. He wanted the Continental Congress, when it promulgated the Declaration of Independence, to get rid of slavery. And when the Southern delegates made it clear that if he, a Virginian, continued to push this anti-slavery message, that the South would make a separate peace with Britain and the American Revolution would fail. So a political decision was made to defer the notion of freedom for the slaves for another time. And we ended up having to fight our bloodiest war, the Civil War, over it. But in order to avoid slave owners using Jefferson's words of liberty to justify slavery, Jefferson had taken his ideas from the ultimate Enlightenment philosopher John Locke. Please make sure you have your notes out. And John Locke, about 80 years before Jefferson writes the Declaration of Independence, in his 2 treatises on government, writes that there are inalienable God-given natural rights that each human being has: life, liberty, and property. Life, God gives us life. We shouldn't take life away unless it's wartime or execution or self-defense. Liberty, God made us with minds capable of learning reason. Therefore, we should be able to make choices, important choices, about our lives and the lives of others. Liberty. And property. Everyone understands property. This Marxist notion that property is unnatural is itself unnatural. You ask a 2-year-old, what's mine? What's yours? What's ours? What's neither of ours? And the 2-year-old gets it. The 2-year-old knows. Ha! Ha ha! Hee hee hee! I took what's yours. I didn't do anything with it. I did take it. And the 2-year-old also knows what it's like to have stuff taken away from him. You want to see a 2-year-old go bat nuts, take something that he thinks is his.
Oh, it's so funny.
It is. Now you see the inner heart of rage and outrage. How dare you? How dare you? In any event, the 2-year-old understands property, and we all understand property. Property is what we earn with our work. When we're given things, we don't appreciate it the same way as when we earn them. My first real job was between my 7th and 8th grade year. I worked on a dairy farm as a field hand. And it was a great job. It was hard. Physically, it was the hardest job I've ever done in my life. I was in great shape after doing that. For years, I was in great shape. Because one of the things I had to do was grab a 50-pound hay bale and wing it up about 2 or 3 stories to a pile of hay in a barn or on a truck or on a trailer. So, you adapt or die in a case like that, and I adapted. And I earned a whopping $1.50 an hour, which was ridiculously low. It was about half minimum wage, under half minimum wage in those days, which was $3.15 an hour or something. So, because I was a kid and I was a farmhand, and farmhands never make decent money. But I saved my money. I worked hard, I saved my money, I worked all summer. And with that money, I bought a 10-speed bike, which was the bee's knees in those days. And that bike was special. It was the first thing I'd ever earned. And I kept that bike for many years, and I treated it differently than any other piece of property I had owned, because I earned it. It was mine to do with as I wanted. And I rode that bike everywhere, within reasonable distance of home. So, life, liberty, and property was Locke's idea of freedom. And Jefferson writes, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. What the hell is the pursuit? What the hell is the pursuit of happiness? What does that even mean? I like football, so I get to watch the Army-Navy game. Who won? Was it played over the weekend?
I don't think so.
Okay, well, it's coming up then. I am not a football guy. I have many enthusiasms for football. I appreciate that other people love it. I have never cared. I have tried. My grandfather really wanted me to learn. Baseball I can do. Basketball, soccer, hockey I can do. But football never did it for me. In any event, pursuit of happiness is Jefferson's approximation of the word property without saying it. Because, among other things, happiness is security. Happiness is doing things, fulfilling your dreams, and you earn that by earning money and gathering property. But if he included the word property, in the future some slave owner could say, well, you said property, and Sambo over there is my property, so you said it. Jefferson never wanted that. So to avoid that, Jefferson quibbled and did Pursuit of Happiness. So yeah, the Spartans are talking about freedom, but they mean freedom for Greece from foreign attack. They don't mean freedom for their slaves. Ephialtes, to my knowledge, was not a hunchback cripple. He was smart. Let me explain smart versus good. In the summer of 1940, Adolf Hitler's Germany had conquered France. In 6 weeks, he did what Kaiser Wilhelm had failed to do in 4.5 years of World War I. Kaiser Wilhelm tried and failed and tried and failed and tried and failed. 4.5 years to conquer France. Failed. In 6 weeks, Hitler succeeds and conquers France. Hitler's armies are from the Spanish border to the North Cape of Norway. They've conquered Poland, Denmark, Norway, Holland, Belgium, Luxembourg, France. They dominate the air. They dominate the land. The only country holding out is Britain. Just before this situation, Britain's appeasement prime minister, a prime minister who gave and gave and gave and gave and gave and gave to Hitler to avoid war, was finally gotten rid of. And fighting prime minister Winston Churchill, this guy on top over here, was made prime minister. And Hitler, who was a racist, liked the English. He had fought the English for 4 years during World War I as a frontline trench soldier. He knew the English. He saw the English as fellow Aryans, as fellow Germans. So Hitler, unlike his offers to anyone else, offered to Britain a peace treaty that was very generous. Britain would keep its navy, its air force, its army, its empire. Britain would be largely free to go about its business and do what it wants to do. Sort of like what Xerxes was offering Leonidas. All Britain had to do was acknowledge that Germany was supreme on the continent and that Germany was the senior partner in their partnership. That's all. That's all. And the establishment in Britain's government said, oh God, we should take this. Look at what he's doing to France. He crushed the French. Our army barely escaped and doesn't have any weapons. Our navy is great, but our navy against the German Air Force is doomed. Our Air Force is good, but it's smaller than the Germans. We should make peace. It's the smart thing to do. Churchill says, we will fight them on the beaches. We will fight them in the hills. We will fight them on the airfields. We will fight them in the streets. We will never surrender. Churchill makes it clear that his policy is to wage war on the land, on the sea, in the air, to wage war until final victory is achieved. He doesn't do what smart people think need to be done. He does what he thinks is right. Again and again throughout history, the smart people said, make peace, surrender, compromise. Compromise. All you have to do is compromise. Churchill didn't compromise, and he saved the world. Had he compromised, the Germans would have won World War II in 1940. Had Leonidas compromised, the Persians would have arrived in Athens before the Athenians were ready. And the entire history of the world would have been different. Leonidas doesn't do what's smart. Ephialtes does. Ephialtes looks and calculates the risk and says, those Persians never would lose a war. They have a 250,000 men. They have 1,000 ships. We're not going to win. We could win a dozen Thermopylae. It doesn't matter. Eventually, the Persians are going to swamp us. Eventually, what never happened in that movie is our arms will tire. There's only so much bing, slash, bing, slash, bing, slash you can do with your shield and spear. Sooner or later, you're going to die. Your muscles are not going to be able to... No. So Ephialtes makes a deal. His deal is he offers victory at Thermopylae by showing the Persians the secret way around this bottleneck, the secret way through the goat path. And in return, Ephialtes is promised to be overlord of Greece, the satrap of Greece for Persia. It was the smart thing to do. It was also the wrong thing to do from the standpoint of a Greek patriot. So Leonidas and his men hold the line and die. And that glorious death is something that we still remember. In war, again and again in the history of Western civilization, you have small armies of free men against large armies of slaves. This was the case when we were fighting the Japanese and the Nazis. They were not free men by our standards. They were slaves by our standards. By their standards, they were patriots. When we were fighting the communists in the Cold War, By our standards, communists aren't free. They don't have the ability to speak freely, think freely, act freely. Communists say we're free because we don't starve. Much. Small numbers of free men, large numbers of slaves. That is often the way of things. So Thermopylae is a strategic victory for Greece in the sense that Persians are delayed. But it's a tactical defeat. It's an absolute defeat. It's another defeat. Every Spartan is dead. Now the Spartan allies, they retreat. The thousands of allies, they go back. Why couldn't Leonidas retreat even if he wanted to? Have you ever seen a turtle run? There's a movie. Run! I forget what movie it is. What? No, that's the story. But there's an animated movie, computer generated animation, and somebody says to a turtle, "Run!" Just like that, with an emphasis on the N, to a turtle. The Spartans are turtles. They're armored, they're tough, but they're slow. The Persians are hares. If the Spartans leave that spot, there isn't another spot like it for a long time. The Spartans will be surrounded by the Persians and destroyed. So, even if Spartans wanted to run, they couldn't. But they don't want to run. Go tell the Spartan stranger passing by that here, obedient to their laws, we lie. Okay, so the Persian army moves south to Athens. When the Persian army arrives, Athens is empty. So the Persians burn it. And they look, where are the Athenians? And they find them. The Athenians are waiting here on Salamis Island. And the Athenian fleet is in battle array here, in this narrow strait, and over here as well. The Persian fleet has caught up to the army. So the Persian fleet is in myriad numbers off the coast of Piraeus, which is here, where Athens port is. It's just ridiculous numbers of ships. Now, how to get to the Athenians? Geography makes the south coast of Salamis a bad place to land. So the Persians aren't going to land there. They could just put troops on ships, go around and land here, but the coast isn't amenable to landing. The best place to land is on the north coast. Besides, the Greek ships are outnumbered 10, 20 to 1 by the Persians. But Admiral Themistocles, General Themistocles, the great, bless you, leader of Athens, is employing the same technique as Leonidas at Thermopylae. This technique, this tactic, is you have an enemy with vastly superior numbers. You draw them into a narrow place. And at that point, in the narrow place, where your numbers are equal to theirs, because that's all who can fit, your superior forces will be able to destroy them, again, like a mouth-eating pizza. Nom, nom, nom. So, what kind of forces are we looking at? Well, the Greek warships, called Galleys, actually, they had a weird tail a little different from that. Okay. The water line's about here. And the galleys have a single mast, big sail. Galley is going this way. It is an oared warship. So you've got oars. And maybe at Salamis you've got 2 ranks of oars. Maybe on the deck you've got a catapult. A rock in it that can shoot, or a giant scorpion, a giant crossbow. But the main weapon right here is the ram. So this is an oar-powered warship. Oar, not metal. That's oar. O-A-R rather than O-R-E. The way war galleys fight is they aim directly at their enemy and they move as quickly as they can. And with their ram, they put a hole in the enemy ship and then they pull back. The enemy ship dies. And then another ship comes up and boom, 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 boom. Now there's some sideways motion, but it's largely a forward attack. There may be catapults or scorpions, giant throwers of rocks and fire pots, giant crossbows. And if you get close enough to enemy ships, you can jump across from your ship to there and fight them with spear and shield, just like you're on land. But that isn't so easy. The primary weapon is the ram. So the Athenians have these narrow spots. Xerxes sets up a command pavilion here on a hilltop to overlook the battle. And he's got map tables and snacks and a comfortable chair. And he's got flagmen near him on this clifftop promontory looking over the gap between the mainland and Salamis Island. And he orders the attack. Just after dawn. The Persian ships go in. Now remember, the Persian ships are not Persian. The Persians don't have a navy of their own. Their empire has the Phoenicians and the Greeks under Persian rule. They are the ones that comprise the Persian ships. So, the Persian ships go forward. But they have to narrow down so that at the point of contact, there's either an equal number of Greek ships, or if the Greeks hang back enough, the Greeks actually have superior numbers at the point of contact. From just after dawn, squadrons of Persian ships go into the narrow waters and are destroyed by Greek warships, by Athenian warships, by the Athenian navy that is not taking anything like similar losses. Persian ships go in, and like wood going into a buzzsaw, they die. They get sunk. Wave after wave after wave after wave. It's now 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning, approaching mid-morning. Wave after wave after wave. Dozens of ships, dozens of ships, dozens of ships, hundreds of men, thousands of men. The Persians do a sneak attack on this side, thinking the Greeks have a weak force here. The same thing happens. All morning. Until just before lunch. Xerxes, who had been watching and watching and watching, stands up, stock upright, turns around, goes into his tent, closes the flaps of the tent, and is in there for over an hour. Nobody can talk to him. He won't answer. He won't answer. He won't let anyone in. He has just seen his navy like butter, and the Athenian fleet is a hot knife. When he comes out, he's a changed man. He orders the attack to stop him. He orders his forces to pull back. And the next day, he and the better half of the Persian army pull out. They go back to Persia. By the numbers, sooner or later, the Persians would have won. But at the Battle of Salamis, it seemed like they could throw all their numbers and the Greeks would still destroy them in those narrow little places. What are you going to do with people like that? Xerxes leaves. He leaves half his army behind under a general named Mardonius. But Xerxes leaves. Because wars are not just about battles. They're about will. Do you honestly think that the Vietnamese could have beaten the Americans in the Vietnam War on the battlefield? We never lost a battle in the sense that whenever the enemy revealed themselves, we destroyed them. We didn't fight aggressively, we didn't fight seriously, but we fought well. But ultimately, enough Americans decided that we should stop fighting, and we did. And the result was 1 million dead South Vietnamese who were foolish enough to trust the Americans. We left, they died, they were killed. To this day, Vietnam is communist. The will to fight, the will to win, the will to keep on going. In a country like Persia, one man's will counts for everything. Xerxes' will. And Xerxes' will was broken on the morning of the Battle of Salamis when he saw his fleet mauled and mauled and mauled and mauled all morning. And when his will to fight broke, the Persians are still going to be there. We'll talk more about that tomorrow, but their real drive to victory is over. Any questions, comments, or thoughts? Okay, then you can talk quiet. Yes, sir.
Why didn't they just have them besieged? Like they just sat there on the straits.
Because thanks to Thermopylae, the Athenians had enough supplies. And because of Thermopylae, Sparta and the rest of Greece take heart and they start fighting. So sooner or later, forces are going to arrive at Athens that are going to relieve the siege. Good question, then. Any others? I see none. You may talk quietly among yourselves until dismissal.